If you've come to this video because you follow my channel on YouTube, thank you very much for following my channel, by the way. But this is probably not a video for you. I'm thinking this is a video for people that have found it in the search engine. It's a tough one for me, even after 12 years. It's a tough one for me, and I'm guessing if you've come here because of the search engines, it's a tough one for you. So I've given you that warning. This is a bit of a tough conversation. I'm hoping it will help people who are in a similar situation, and I sincerely hope it gives you, well, one, some hope, you do come through this, two, it might give you some foresight, and three, it might give you some ideas and help. I can only hope that's the outcome of this. So you've had your warning. If you come here for my happy-go-lucky scamp type video, or grumpy old man videos, if you come for those, this probably isn't the one, but I felt I had to do this. This is just about my story. Everyone's will be different. I suspect the grieving process I went through will be much the same for everybody. But please remember, this is my story, my circumstances. Yours may well, or probably will, be slightly different. I was married to the mother of my children for a number of years. That went wrong for various reasons, which I won't go into here. And I divorced and I met Anna. We had many, many really happy years. We did some fantastic holidays. We did some great things. We bought a house together in the south of France. We had some real adventures. But when I met Anna, she had just finished her breast cancer treatment, had a number of operations, and she had been given the all clear, but we kind of all knew it was a bit risky. And people who asked Anna about cancer, she'd say it's the best thing that ever happened to her, and it used to shock people. And she said because it taught her to live every day, extract everything from every day. I think there's a lot of people sort of sleep through their lives, and suddenly that sort of focus that actually life is short, get on with it. Anyway, that's a whole different story. Anyway, we had many, many years of a lot of fun, doing lots of things, going on amazing holidays. And when I look back now, it's that I see. I'll come on to why that is. We'd been out in France fitting out our new house. She'd helped me lift a really heavy work surface onto the kitchen, and we were driving home after the week of working on the house. She said, I can't drive, I can't lift my arms up to the steering wheel. And we just thought it was lifting that heavy worktop. When we got home, she went to the hospital, had a scan, and it turned out she'd got cancer back in her lymph nodes, bones, brain, lungs, and worst of all, the liver. And really, that was a shock. It was a bombshell, and her diagnosis was probably a year. As it turns out, I'll come on to that, pure bloody mindedness, she did 3, and with of course with a huge amount of chemo and radiotherapy, she managed 3 years. I'll come on to all that anyway. We generally don't get to choose how we die, and there's a number of time scales, and each has, it'd be crass to call them pros and cons, but there's issues with each which we'll look at very quickly here. I don't want to linger on this one. I had a friend who, as a teenager, keen skier, rattling down the slope, somebody skied out in front of him, they had a collision. It broke his neck, and they reckon he died instantly. They reckon he died before he even hit the ground. Now, for him, that's the way to go, really. He was like being switched off. And for his family, though, it was a completely different situation. Suddenly their teenage son with everything in front of him, all is good. They get a phone call, he's died. And now that's a huge shock, and it comes very suddenly with no warning. And that shock is probably the biggest problem there. On the plus side, and there is a plus side, what they remember is they remember him as that skier. They remember him in his prime, sadly, because he was cut off in his prime, literally, but they remember him in his prime. And I'll come on to the problems I had with that. So then you've got things like heart attacks, which actually generally are pretty quick. Yes, they might take a few days. Somebody has a heart attack, they have some more problems, they're in hospital, and finally they die. That's relatively quick. In my case, Anna, we had the diagnosis and then 3 years. And there's a problem with that. The problem with that is that you remember the person as that ill person. The problem was I remembered her as the ill person, not the well person, not the shining, smiling, glowing person that we all got to love. And suddenly you're remembering somebody who's very ill, and she was very ill with her chemotherapy and radiotherapy. And the problem for those left behind is that they remember that, certainly for a number of years. And I will come on to that. There's a plus side to that warning. It allows you to get all your things in order. It allows you to tell people what you want. I mean, some people die and their family don't even know whether they want to be buried, cremated, or what they, or even if they had a religion. You know, when it's sudden, you don't get that. You don't get that ability to make those plans. So we had 3 years knowing, and while it's very painful those 3 years, it does give you time to make plans, what you want for your funeral, you know, how you're going to deal with things, what you're going to leave to people, sort your will out, close various things, and, you know, say things that need to be said. That's quite a big advantage. As I say, it's crass to call it an advantage, but that's a pro to having that warning. A very sad part of that, after Anna had died, many years after Anna had died, I was going through clearing out checkbooks. We don't use checks anymore in the UK, and I found her checkbook, and in the stub was funeral and the amount, and I just sat there and I just thought, nobody should have to write a check for their funeral. You know, and that's something we'll come on to. It's harsh. Let's have a quick look through the sequence of events. Again, remember, this is my sequence of events. I don't think it's so different to many people. There's the bombshell. Basically, when you find out, a lot of people, when they find out they have cancer or another illness, I mean, this is not cancer specific, there's a chance that they can sort it, and there's the not knowing which way it's going to go. For Anna, that wasn't the case. They sat her down and they said, you're not going to survive this. And she didn't want to know the timescales, but the doctors told me, and it was a year. And they said once it's in the liver, they couldn't do anything, or couldn't do much with it. They could only hold it at bay. So there's that bombshell, and I remember it. Well, you'll never forget that sort of thing. We were driving home from the hospital. We'd gone into the hospital with, you know, got these sore arms. I think it's from lifting something. They did an X-ray. Or a scan, I think an X-ray. Came back and said, oh, there's a shadow on the lung, we'll do a blood test. This is bad. She had a full scan, and we sat down with the doctor, and he said, you're not going to survive this. So the shock of that is just incredible. We drove home in silence, really. I mean, we were both in absolute shock driving home, and I think probably it was a few days to sink in. I don't think we slept for a few days. We then had telling the family, really tough. Anna had 2 sons. We had my kids that she was a stepmom to. It was telling everybody, and then telling friends. I'll come on to friends, because friends was a tricky one. But it's all tricky. It's a tough time, and there's probably a few days of just coming to terms with that knowledge and what's coming up. We were very lucky. We had Farley Hospice and the Macmillan Nurse, who moved in very quickly, turned up, and they just took over running everything. They said, right, you're going to need this, we need to do that, your finances this, what about your health insurance, what about your job, what about this, you'll need a blue badge. Anna said, I won't need a blue badge, I'm not having a blue badge. Yes, you will, and we've ordered it. What about so-and-so, have you made a will? You know, they literally just organised everything in a beautiful way, not in a, not in a control way, but in a beautiful way. We had this incredible Macmillan nurse, Sharon. Sharon's going to have a quick review of this video, so hopefully it meets your approval, Sharon. And we had this wonderful Macmillan nurse, Sharon. She was fantastic. Got to know us very well. Came to our weddings, and I'm still in touch with her. Actually, lovely, lovely person. And Macmillan and Farley Hospice, just incredible. Whatever you do, don't push these people away. They're such an incredible help. Farley Hospice, one of these organisations where every time you had any contact with them or anything to do with them, they exceeded your expectations. Now, to just keep exceeding expectations forever, it's really difficult to do, but they managed to do it. Absolutely incredible organisation. We'll come back onto them a bit later on. We actually had some friends who just couldn't handle the news. We lost some friends because they just couldn't deal with what we were going through, and that was a bit of a shock to us, really. We definitely lost a few friends, and in fact we had one friend who said, "I'm sorry, I just can't deal with this," and we didn't see them anymore. And we had friends who overcompensated, "Oh, it'll all be all right." No, it won't. And then we had friends who just didn't know how to deal with it, didn't know how to talk to us about it. They didn't say anything. So we had these sort of awkward, not your normal friendship, go out for a meal or something. They didn't quite know, whether they should talk about it or not talk about it, or what can be said, or were they going to put their foot in it. And so basically it changes everything. Everybody around you changes. And often the heroes of this are not the people you expect. And that was something we learnt as well. The heroes who came out and saved my sanity or made a real difference for Anna, often not the people we expected. The next stage, and for lack of a better term, I'll call it the illness period. So for Anna, that was 3 years. We found it was kind of a sawtooth pattern. It went, she'd have a sort of high, then she'd have a crash, then she'd come back up, but she wouldn't come up quite as high as she left, and then another drop, and it would be slightly lower than the time before, and then she'd come back up, and again not quite to where she'd left off before. And over the years we had this sort of general decline on a sort of sawtooth pattern, and sometimes she felt quite good and sometimes she felt absolutely dreadful, and we just had to plan around that. But let's call it the illness period, and let's look at what goes on in that period. Again, my circumstances, 3 years. Some people only get a month or two, depending on what the illness is. As well as taking as much help from Farley Hospice and our Macmillan Nurse as we could, we then started on a bucket list. We had a number of things we really wanted to do, or Anna definitely wanted to do. She wanted to see the Northern Lights. We booked a cruise and went to Norway. It was actually turned out an absolute disaster. We didn't even get on the cruise, let alone see the Northern Lights. Not even anything to do with Anna's illness. The ship broke down, basically. We got married, which was something that was important to Anna. We did a lot of things, and most of those were Anna's bucket list. Before I die, I want to do this. She had a thing for butterflies. Butterflies were always her thing. We went to London Zoo, to the butterfly house, and we did everything we could, to go through that bucket list. And to be fair, that's something that you remember at the end as well. A lot of the things I remember fondly of Anna, I remember from that bucket list. We were very lucky because Anna's employment came with a death in service payment, which allowed us to do those things and tick off that bucket list. But not everything on a bucket list is expensive. Just an aside here, when you're in that illness stage, if you can't cook, work the washing machine, run the house, as a carer, you're going to have to learn pretty damn quick, but learn those things. you're going to be doing them. And I was quite lucky. I was quite domesticated. I'd spent quite a lot of time on my own over the years. I'd spent some time in the RAF, so I was reasonably comfortable. Though I have to say, Anna did say to me, "I'm going to give you some cooking lessons," and that's just something you plan along the way. We also had slightly more brutal things to deal with. Anna had a car which she couldn't drive because she'd had radiotherapy. She thought she'd get her license back. I think probably secretly we all knew she probably wouldn't, but she had this car that we kept running, and she needed to decide what was going to happen to the car. We got a disability scooter, which was astronomically expensive, but bought her freedom. She was able to go out on her own to a certain degree. There was things to hand over. There was my pensions, my this, my that, what she wants to happen to all her things when she's died. It's a tough one, and with the help of the hospice and our Macmillan nurse, they were saying, look, you need to think about these things. You need to cover this. What are you going to do about your funeral? And they put a nice sort of slant on it. They had days where they went to other funerals because, of course, this is a hospice, and people would come back and say, oh yeah, I want to do that, So dreadful as that sounds, when you're talking about it in the cold light of day, it's actually a process you need to go through. And it was all sorts of things, bank accounts that we didn't even know we'd got, or I didn't know she'd got, or she didn't know I'd got, sorting those out and that sort of thing. Wills, obviously a will is an obvious one. Again, I'll come on to that because the lady who wrote our wills when we knew this was happening, she gave some great advice which I'll pass on to you later on. The other thing we had was carer days. Now, the saying on the plane, put your own oxygen mask on first. If you're ill as a carer, you can't care, and therefore the person you're caring for suffers as well. So the hospice were really good with carer days. They'd invite me in, they'd say, we're going to have a morning coffee, or we're going to have a lunch, or we're going to have a so-and-so. Come in and have lunch, take some downtime. We'll look after Anna while you go off and have a lunch. In reality, a lot of the people you were with had lost their partners X years before. And so it was a counselling session if you wanted it. But, I remember talking to people and they said, yeah, I lost my wife so many years ago. And they're there to sort of pass on the sort of thing I'm trying to put across in this video. So those carer days were absolutely fantastic. The toughest decisions to make were Anna deciding what she wanted in the end. Initially, Anna wanted to die at home. I wasn't so keen on that for two reasons. Firstly, and this is a selfish one, I felt that it would change the way I looked at the home from then on in. And in particular the room. Again, I'll come on to that because this room has history, and it turns out it was a problem I had that I didn't even know I had. We will come on to that. But also I felt that in the hospice she would get better care, the nurses are there, and I think in the end that was the right decision. You've got to think about things like funerals and what you want, who you want there. Anna had an ex-husband who she didn't want there, and she said, if he turns up, I want him thrown out. I really don't want him there, and he's threatening to turn up. And that sort of thing, you just need to put across. And she wanted butterflies, she wanted this and that, and she wanted to be cremated and have her ashes in a bluebell wood, without any sort of headstone or anything, where the wood just slowly takes over. And that's what she wanted. Again, it's a tough one to do for yourself. We're not good at it. And so that type of planning for the end has to come for the person who's dying, but also for the carer. So the hospice said to me, when it happens, you'll be in shock. You need to think about what you're going to do and, how you see it happening or how you're going to feel about it. My decision was that I would immediately take away all the disability handles and things in the house. So the hospice arranged for great big handles to be put on all the doorways, any steps, ramps and things like that. We had quite a lot of modifications to the house so that Anna could stay at home for as long as possible, and the hospice organised all that. But for me, they sort of portrayed the illness in my head, and I understand this is quite common. So my thing was that I wanted to, as soon as anything had happened to Anna, I wanted to come home and just get rid of all those handles and disability things in my eyes. Huge aids for Anna, but in my mind they were a sign of the disability. I'd also decided I'd just clear off to Scotland, just clear off into the mountains for a week. Yes, I'd smell rank, but I'd walk and walk and walk while I think about it and just get it through in my head. And that's effectively what I did as well, a week or two after she died. With all these plans in place, you'd think it was going to go to plan. Doesn't always go to plan. All you can do is take a best shot at the planning. I mean, our Macmillan Nurse, Sharon, absolutely bang on, almost to the day when it would happen. From months before, she's seen it all before. And she was bang on correct. But there's nothing to say. We had a few incidents before Anna died, probably 2-3 months before she died, where the hospital, at the time she'd gone into the hospital because of a problem, hospital rang me and said, get in, get here now. And it turned out to be a false call, though, as I said, I think probably it was Anna's pure determination to fight it was a certain element in that. But as I say, you can make the best plans in the world, but you can't always be certain of what's going to happen. When it first happens, and I think this is true in every country, not just the UK, you have a huge amount of obligatory things you have to do. You have to get a death certificate, you have to register the death, you have to go to the bank and sort of close accounts, you have to stop any disability benefit payments that are being received, that sort of thing. And I found that the week afterwards, while I was in shock, I was kept busy by all these things I had to do, make an appointment to go and get the death certificate. And so it sort of was a week of shock that was busy. And in a way, that busyness was actually, in a way, it was a help. There was a lot to organise and a lot to do. And so, yeah, the first week you're kept out of mischief. And of course, you've got all your friends ringing you, people ringing you, letters of condolence. Everybody's really good about that. And that's the first week. I found after that, it then went very quiet. And I always thought, if I have a friend in this situation, something I will do is be the person that remembers to phone, not just the week afterwards, but the month afterwards, or even 3 months afterwards. It was very noticeable. The first week, everyone was, really fantastic, and it was everyone was sad and with me and thinking of me, that sounds terribly selfish. It wasn't just me, but you know what I mean. A lot of friends were supporting me, and then a few weeks later, it was almost silent. And that's actually when I really needed the help. So if you are that friend, just bear that in mind. Be the one that carries on phoning the months or two afterwards. We had another issue, which some of you are going to say, what a lovely issue, and yes, it is. We had, or I have, a beautiful house in the south of France, which we bought together. When Anna left there, she wasn't very well, but we weren't expecting it to be her last time there. She'd left all her things, her book by the bed, her slippers, all her personal things, all her bits and pieces out. And I remember thinking, months after, and when I'm starting to look ahead, after she died, I'd go out to France and I'd be dropped straight into this. And one of Anna's best friends kindly came out to France with me and went ahead and did that for me, so I didn't have to deal with it. And I'll come on to things that you can plan like that in a minute. Anna died between Christmas and New Year. I mean, to be fair, she'd been hanging on for Christmas, and only just made it. But she died between Christmas and New Year. We had the funeral, I think, about a month afterwards, and then buried her ashes in the bluebell woods in the spring. What I found is the actual death is not the final outcome. In my head, it wasn't the final outcome. I was still going through the plan and the whatever. What really hit me was the funeral. The funeral hit me so hard. I saw it initially in my head as a sort of formality, and yes, this is what Anna wanted, and we've done all that, and it's going to be great. It's exactly what she wanted. Da 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 da, and patting myself on the back for getting that right, and I saw it as a formality. And then the coffin pulled up, and it knocked me absolutely flat. I couldn't even stand there. In fact, I think I nearly fell over. I think if it hadn't been somebody grabbed me and just sort of walked me away, I think I'd probably fallen over. It was absolutely dreadful. It hit me so hard. And I guess everybody's different. I guess some people, it's the death that hits them hard. But for me, it was the funeral. The funeral for me was, this has really happened now. This has happened, and I guess also funerals are often there for the people that are left. Well, they're obviously left for the people left behind. And I think probably there's a very beneficial function of the funeral. It kind of says, this is it, it's over. Now it's time to move forward. By the way, I got a friend of mine, John. Thank you for doing this, John. He lost his wife, I think, 3.5 years ago. He's just been through, or going through, these stages now. And he reviewed this video very kindly. And he was very keen to point out, you're not moving on, you're moving forward. And that was a great point. Thank you, John. So after the funeral, I found that's the time I needed friends to come and see me, look after me, and chat to me. Again, Farley Hospice, absolutely fantastic. They rang me lots. Are you all right? Would you like to talk to somebody? Can we send somebody around to see you? You only had to say yes. Somebody turned up, and they would then take it from there. Do you need counselling? Perhaps you just need a chat and a cup of tea. But they were absolutely fantastic. As I say, reach out to the hospices. Absolutely incredible organisations, and of course they know exactly what to do. So that time from the funeral for maybe 3 months, I think you have to accept you're not yourself. I would say to you, and again I'll come on to this, I keep saying I'll come on to stuff, I would say to you, don't make any life-changing decisions for a year or two afterwards. There are people who say, oh, I can't deal with being in this house, I can't deal with this, and they make a big change, they jack in their job, or they move house, or they move abroad, or they move in with a partner, and we'll come on to that, another we'll come on to, I'm afraid. But I'm just saying, be wary of making any life-changing decisions in the next year or two. This was advice given to me by my friend Jill, who was our solicitor. She's a family friend as well. I go diving with her and her husband. And she said to me, I would recommend you don't make any big changes for a year or two. And looking back on it, I am so glad I listened to her. There was a few times I thought, no, I've just got to sell the house and move. And I would have regretted it then. So that was really good advice. Another piece of advice given to me by Jill, and this is a bit brutal, and I'm sure she said it to me in a somewhat brutal way to get me to take it seriously. At the funeral, she said to me, you have to look after yourself. You have never been in a more dangerous position with your own health. And that was very good advice. It's a bit like people who work. They then take a week off and go on the golf course, and then they have a heart attack. The problem comes when you take the pressure off, not when the pressure's on and the adrenaline's going, and you're in that sort of in that wave, and then suddenly the pressure's off, and bang, anything that you've bottled up health-wise will hit you then. So Jill was pretty tough about it. She said, "You've never been in a more dangerous place. You need to look after yourself at least for the next 2 or 3 months. You need to pamper yourself and get yourself back up to strength." I have to say, 3 years of caring, I only just made it. I mean, we only just made it. It was very, very tough. And, you know, I don't say that lightly. There are people out there that have been caring for their partner for decades. But in my circumstances with Anna's illness, and I was working at the same time, so I was getting up at ridiculous o'clock in the morning to get everything ready for the day. I was going to work, I was coming home, and then I was doing all the clearing up and everything afterwards, cooking, cleaning, pretty much everything. And for 3 years, and the caring element, you know, your ears are never off. You know, it's a bit like a new mother can hear that baby just making any noise. You know, as a carer, you never quite switch off. You know, you might have a bath, but you're actually always listening and thinking, what was that noise? Is she okay? You know, has she fallen, which was always one of the risks. So yeah, good advice, I think, for at least for a few months, 2 or 3 months afterwards. Look after yourself. It's a bit like the oxygen mask again. Put your own oxygen mask on. I'm not sure, I think I did realise, but I'm not sure many people realise quite how, I think damaged is too strong a word, quite how tough that process has been of caring for somebody and then losing somebody. It's tough. Probably for 2 to 3 months, possibly more, straight after Anna died and the funeral, and during that time, those early stages, I would just burst into tears. No reason, just be sitting there, bang. I'd burst into tears, and I'd sit there and say, pull yourself together, you know, pull yourself together. But there was nothing you could do about it. You just burst into tears. And slowly that changed to being something that triggered me. So a song came on the radio that was our song, or the song when we were on holiday in so, or anything like that. Smells, I found smells. Just walking past somebody with the same perfume in the street was a trigger, you know, and I'd just fall apart. And then slowly it took more and more to trigger me. And that is the mending process. I'm going to read you something from a book I read, and I'm going to read it because I want to get it right. It's a book called The Unlikely Journey of Harold Fry. It's been made into a film as well, but I've read the book and I think the book was slightly more subtle than the film, though the film was good. And the neighbour of Harold Fry was describing how he'd lost his wife, and this is how he described it. It's like discovering a great hole in the ground. To begin with, you forget it's there and keep falling in. But after a while, it's still there, but you learn to walk round it. And that's exactly, I mean, that absolutely nailed how I felt about it. Initially, you've got this great big hole, you just keep falling into it. And then slowly you learn to walk round it. And I learned there was things that I could plan for. So, for example, anniversaries, Anna's birthday, any large family gathering like a wedding, that sort of thing. Christmas, obviously, the first Christmas after Anna had died, the New Year's Eve, that sort of thing. Anywhere where you would have been together or you traditionally did something together, you've got to deal with it. But on the plus side, you can plan it. You know how you're going to feel. You've got an idea of how it's going to go, and you know that you're going to feel rough, and you know that you're going to struggle with it. But you can plan it. You can be ready for it. You can sort of put your armour on and be ready for what's going to happen because you know it's coming. But then I had another thing, and I named it a landmine. And the landmine was something you just couldn't predict. You just didn't know it was going to happen. And earlier I said, a song comes on the radio. That could be that type of thing. But to give you an example of probably the landmine that hit me the hardest, and I think probably 6-7 years after I'd lost Anna, I was out in France and I was just clearing something away and I opened something up and a Valentine's card she'd left for me and either forgotten to give me or had actually left for me fell out. You can't plan for that. That absolutely knocked me flat. And that's 6, 7 years on. So those landmines are a bit more difficult to deal with just because you don't know where they're going to be. And as I say, it's like standing on a landmine, there's no warning. I had another one, so we're now 12 years on since Anna died. And I had another one the other day, hit me straight in the face. I was going through all my flying paperwork. I was a keen pilot. I often struggled to keep my hours up, and you have to keep current with so many hours. And I'd often have to cram in a few extra hours just to, with an instructor, just to keep my license current. And I was going through all the paperwork and medicals, there's a ton of paperwork in a pilot's license, and I found a piece of paper. I can't read it out because I won't be able to bring myself to do it, but it was a message from Anna just written on the top of my flying paperwork saying, I've bought you some lessons, go and get your license back. So, as I say, I can't say what it is. I might put a picture on here, but I'm going through my paperwork for my license. The last thing I expect is to get that landmine in the middle of it. And initially, that would have knocked me off my feet, and now, some time on, I don't see it like that. I actually see it as a fond memory, and that's how we repair. I think if I said to you, you're not going to have any problems with this, I'd probably be lying or trying to fool you. The hospice and Macmillan Nurse and good friends will get you through a whole lot of things. I had a couple of things that really, in hindsight, were quite a big problem, which I wish I'd dealt with differently. So, for example, I had 2 or 3 dreams several months after Anna died, where I dreamt that her dying was just a bad dream, and she hadn't died, all was well. Then I'd wake up, I'd go through the whole bloody grieving process again. It would step me back, however many weeks or months of my progress of repair. And in hindsight, I should have talked to somebody about it. I did talk to some friends, but I'm kind of thinking I should have got some counselling on that one. Those types of things, just things to look out for. It's going to be tough. It's always going to be tough. I regularly thought back to Love Actually, where his wife had died, and she said, look, this was always going to be a totally shit time. And I often thought back to that when I was sitting there trying to get my act together. I would think to myself, yeah, we always knew this was going to be a shit time. And there's no other way to spin it. It's a tough time, and you need to find ways to deal with it. And there are lots of ways to deal with it, but time is the best healer. Again, hospices. And there are a number of organisations, I'll try and put some in the comments at the bottom. There are a number of organisations that will help you in any of those situations. As I say, I wish I had recognised that problem earlier on. One of the reasons for making this video, 12 years on, I'm now looking at selling my house. As I say, straight after Anna had died would have been the wrong time, but I'm now thinking now is the time. I'm ready to do that now. I had this room I'm in now, was a hoarding room. I couldn't actually get in it. It was literally filled with junk. And after I'd cleared it, I realised that this had been Anna's bedroom when she was at home ill, because it's downstairs, she couldn't do the stairs. And that's why I hadn't used the room. I'd sort of found an excuse for not using the room. And actually, when I cleared it, I looked back and I thought, yeah, that was a problem I didn't even know I had. And that's 12 years later. So, you do have to sort of start looking at yourself introspectively and thinking, am I dealing with this? How am I dealing with it? Am I all right? And if you're not, seek that help out. It is good. What I found helped: good friends, good friends you can talk to, good friends who understand where you are. Just fantastic. Just fantastic. I kept myself busy. I'm quite a busy person anyway. I do lots of things, but I found, you know, lots of lots of activities, lots of hobbies, sports, lots of out walking, riding the bike, walking the mountains. I did lots, and I found keeping busy, for me, it might not be for everybody, but for me it worked. It stopped me from sitting and thinking morbidly, for lack of a better term. And another strange one that got me through was a dark sense of humour. I've got a very dark sense of humour, and really that helped me. It's not for everybody, but it did get me through. And there's a little story at the end I'm going to share just to lighten the mood at the end of this. And it's very dark humour, but it does make me smile now. I'll call this bit the how long before. We've all heard it. You've met somebody, but it's only X years since so-and-so died, or X months, or whatever. Totally wrong. Everyone to themselves. How long before you start to feel better? How long before you start, stop bursting into tears at the sight of something or for no reason at all? It's everybody to their own. For me, 3 months of bursting into tears at nothing. A year or two at bursting into tears when I was triggered by a song or something. A few more years and I was starting to remember Anna as she had been, the glowing, bubbly person she had been, and not the person who was ill. That, for me, was the biggest curse for me, was that for years I remembered Anna as the ill person, not as the person I knew. And that's really very sad. So anyway, getting back onto how long before you meet somebody else? There's no right and wrong answer. A friend of mine met. She wasn't a carer, but she was somebody who was helping him while his wife was in care and was dying. And not long after she died, they both suddenly realised they had a load in common, and they got married. And as far as I know, all good. So there's no right and wrong answer. You might meet somebody straight away. Bear in mind what I've said, though, that it went for a number of years afterwards. Are you in a position to make that decision on whether this is the right partner for you or not? Just consider that. But there is no right and wrong answer. There's no hard and fast. When will you be back to your bubbly, laughing self? Some people never do. Some people, just... My feeling was I would probably stay single forever. Anne had said to me, "Don't you dare, you need to get on with your life." She was very blunt about that. As a trained counsellor also, she was good at talking about things like that. But there was a time when I just thought, well, that's it. There's not going to be anyone else for me. There's no right and wrong time. So this, how long before, can't be answered really. As I say, it's each to their own. When you think it's right to meet somebody else, it's right. For me, I met some people, some ladies. I'm trying to think how many years after Anna died. It was never going to work because I wasn't in that right place, and it was me. Hope they're not watching this because they'll probably say we knew that all along. But you know what I mean. There is no right and wrong answer for the how long. It's each to their own. And eventually, at some point in the future, you do move forward. Some people find religion helps. I'm not a religious person. It didn't do anything for me. But for some people, that is a huge comfort. For me, it was the turning point for me was when I started to remember Anna as she was, and not Anna the ill person. That for me was a sort of milestone that told me that I was looking at it from the right perspective. And I found also that things that would have previously upset me then started to give me warmth. I'm not sure it's a sort of grey area in between. But I remember now I've got one of these photo frames, Google frames that just keeps flicking over your pictures and memories in the kitchen. And whenever a picture of Anna comes up, I smile and I get a warm feeling about it. And for me, that tells me that I've sort of turned a corner on that, and I now see fond memories and good memories and all the good things, and not just the ill Anna or the illness or the loss. The early days when I went to things like weddings and just burst into tears. Now, if I go to a wedding, so Anna's son got married 2 years ago. I went to the wedding. Yes, I knew it was going to be a tough one, but it wasn't tough because I was sad and upset. It was tough because I knew all I kept thinking was Anna would be so proud to see him here. And her other son, when he passed his driving license and got his own place, I just sat and thought Anna would have been so proud to see where he is now. And for my kids, my daughter's wedding's coming up this year, and I know there'll be a point. Sorry, I'm getting a bit upset now. I know there'll be a point where I'll think to myself, Anna would be so proud to be here. She would just so love to see this. And it brings me warmth, not sadness. And often it's little things. My cat, who is wandering around here somewhere, I say my cat, she was Anna's cat. So every time the cat comes up and makes a fuss of me and nudges me, I've got that connection with Anna. And initially... when Anna died, the cat sat in her chair for about a week without moving, refused to move, and that really saddened me. And now when the cat comes up to me and sort of gives me a nudge and asks for her breakfast, it's a connection with Anna, and it's a nice feeling. It does come through in the end. I really hope this has helped rather than hindered. Put in the comments if you like. Put anything in the comments. I'd have liked this video when I was in that situation. As I say, I was very lucky to have Sharon telling me what would be happening, how things would happen, and sort of holding my hand and preparing me. She was fantastic at saying to me, this, you need to look out for this, and this is a problem, and this is what's happening, and she was really good at it. So I really hope this has helped. As I say, put in the comments if there's anything that you'd like to feed back on it. I've tried to do this as tactfully as I can. As I say, it's a tough subject. Westerners aren't good at talking about death, which is a bit odd really, because it's one of the few things we can all be absolutely certain is going to happen to us. But I really hope this has helped you, and I wish you all the best, and I really sincerely hope that something I've suggested here has either helped you along the way or will give you some help in sorting things out and seeing things in a certain way. Let's lighten things up now, because we need to finish on a bit of a high. And let's go on to my dark sense of humour. So, while Anna was a diabetic, she had one of these, I was going to call it an EpiPen, but I don't think it is an EpiPen. It's a diabetic pen. It has a tiny little micro needle. It's like a hair. And to protect the needle, there's a little plastic, blue-grey plastic cylinder. Tiny little thing that you have to pull off the needle because the needle's so fragile. And she used to quietly sit in a restaurant and give herself a quick jab of I don't know, diabetic pen. But after the chemo, she had neuropathy, so she couldn't feel things with her fingers. So she'd take this tiny little cylinder off the end of the needle and drop it somewhere. And these bloody cylinders were everywhere through the house. If you took the cushion off the sofa, 6 of them down the back. Every crack, every split in the carpet, everywhere there were these little blue-grey cylinders. I remember walking along the drive and I looked down, and in the gravel was one of these little cylinders. They were absolutely everywhere. And I said to Anna, I said, it's going to be a tough one, those little cylinders, because I'm going to be finding them for years, and it's going to make me think of you every time. And she said to me, well, that'll be me haunting you. And I said, oh, that's not fair. That's really not fair, you know. And we had a cleaner at the time who was a nurse, and she laughed and said, no, that's not fair. You can't say that, Anna, you know. Anyway, and this completely blows my mind. After Anna died, and I mean days after Anna died, I never, ever saw another of those blue cylinders, and to this day haven't. 12 years on, I've never seen another one of those. And recently I've been clearing all my house out to sell. I've had bits of carpet up, and you know, I've really been clearing, and I still haven't seen a single one of those cylinders. And not long after Anna had died, and I noticed this, I said to my cleaning lady, you've gone through and cleared all them, haven't you, because of her comment? And she said, no, I promise you I haven't. And so, with my dark sense of humour, I say, if she haunted me, she came back and she cleared them all away. And it still blows my mind that I've never, ever seen one of those cylinders since she died. Anyway, I hope this has helped, and I'm glad we finished on a bit more of a high.